Welcome back to Storyova, the place where stories unfold, secrets surface, and the truth always finds its way into the light. If you love gripping, thought-provoking stories that keep you on the edge of your seat, make sure you're subscribed and ready for what's coming next. Because today's story is one you won't forget. The lawyer looked at me, paused for just a moment longer than comfortable, then leaned back in his chair and said, "You might want to read page 7 again." At the time, I thought it was just a formality, a technicality, something buried in legal jargon that didn't really matter. I was wrong, and by the time I realized just how wrong I was, it was already too late. Let me take you back to the beginning. It all started on a Tuesday afternoon, the kind that feels too ordinary to carry any significance. I remember the sky being dull, the kind of gray that doesn't quite commit to rain but threatens it anyway. I had just gotten home from work when I found the envelope. It was sitting right there on the kitchen counter, not in the mailbox, not slipped under the door, just placed there. That alone should have told me something wasn't right. I live alone, no roommates, no family nearby, and I'm very particular about locking my doors. So seeing that envelope sitting neatly on my counter sent a small but unmistakable chill down my spine. At first, I told myself it had to be something simple. Maybe I'd left the door unlocked. Maybe a neighbor dropped it off. Maybe it had been there all along and I just hadn't noticed. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. The envelope was addressed to me. My full name, written in clean, precise handwriting. No return address. No stamps. Just my name. I hesitated before opening it. Not out of fear exactly, but because something about it felt deliberate. Like whoever had placed it there knew I would find it, knew I would open it, and knew exactly how I would react. Eventually, curiosity won. Inside was a document. Several pages, clipped together. At the top, in bold letters, were the words, "Last Will and Testament." I frowned. I didn't recognize the name immediately. It belonged to a man named Edward Hale, and that name meant nothing to me, at least, not yet. I flipped through the pages quickly at first, scanning for anything that might explain why I had this document in my hands. It looked legitimate. Legal formatting, signatures, official language. Not something someone could easily fake. Then I saw my name, buried halfway down the second page. I had been listed as a beneficiary. That's when everything shifted, because I didn't know Edward Hale. I was sure of it. I ran through every possibility in my mind: distant relatives, old acquaintances, someone from work, but nothing fit. And yet, there it was, according to the document. Edward Hale had left me something, not money, not property. Something described only as the contents outlined in Schedule B. Schedule B. I flipped through the pages again, more carefully this time, looking for it. It was attached at the back. Page 7. But before I could even read it, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something told me not to. When I answered, the voice on the other end was calm, professional. "Hello, is this Daniel Carter?" "Yes," I said slowly. "My name is Thomas Reed. I'm calling from Reed and Associates. I believe you've received a document that belongs to one of our clients." My grip on the phone tightened slightly. "Yes, I'd like you to come in and discuss it. There are some important details we need to go over." That was the first time I felt it, that subtle shift from confusion to unease. Because this wasn't a mistake, this was intentional. The next morning, I found myself sitting in a quiet office, across from a man who looked like he'd spent his entire life dealing with secrets. Thomas Reed was exactly what you'd expect from a lawyer. Impeccably dressed, calm, measured. But there was something else there too. Something harder to define. He wasn't just professional. He was cautious. He slid the document across the desk toward me. "I assume you've read this." "Some of it," I admitted. "I don't understand why I'm in it." He nodded, as if he'd expected that. "Edward Hale passed away 2 weeks ago. You were specifically named in his will. But I don't know him." That, he said, is what makes this unusual. I leaned forward slightly. Unusual how? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he tapped the document lightly. Tell me, did you read all of it? I hesitated. No, not everything. Then you might want to read page 7 again. That was the moment, the exact moment everything began to unravel. I turned to the back of the document, my fingers suddenly feeling heavier than they should have. Page 7. Schedule B. At first glance, it didn't look like much. Just a list. Items, descriptions, notes. But then I started reading. And the air in the room changed. Item 1, a key, brass, stored in a safety deposit box under the name EHITEM2, a storage unit. Location provided. Access granted upon verification. Item 3, a photograph. Dated May 12, 2003. Item 4, a journal. Item 5, the record. I frowned. What is this? Reed watched me carefully. These are the items left to you. But why me? He exhaled slowly. That's not the only thing on that page. I looked back down. At the bottom, beneath the list, was a paragraph I hadn't noticed before. It was written differently, not in the formal tone of the rest of the document. This felt personal to the one reading this. If you are seeing this, then the time has come. You may not understand your role in this yet, but you will. The truth has been waiting for you. Start with the photograph. It will lead you where you need to go. And whatever you do, don't ignore what you find. I felt a chill run through me. This doesn't make any sense. No, Reed said quietly. It doesn't. I looked up at him. You knew about this. I've read the will, yes. And you're just okay with this. He leaned back slightly. My job is to execute the wishes of my client. That's it. For the most part, I stared at him, trying to read his expression. There's more, isn't there? He didn't answer right away, and that silence told me everything. Mr. Carter, he said finally, I would strongly advise you to follow the instructions. Why? Because Edward Hale was very specific about one thing, and what's that? He held my gaze. That you would ask that question. I left the office with more questions than answers, and one very clear instruction. Start with the photograph. I didn't sleep much that night. My mind kept circling back to that page, to the way Reed had looked at me, to the feeling that I had somehow stepped into something that had been waiting for me long before I even knew it existed. The next morning, I went to the safety deposit box. The bank clerk didn't ask many questions. Everything had already been arranged. My name was on the authorization list. That alone should have scared me more than it did. Inside the box was exactly what the document had described. A small brass key. And a photograph. My hands hesitated as I picked it up. It was old, slightly faded, the edges worn, and the moment I saw it, everything stopped. Because the photograph wasn't of Edward Hale, it was of me, or at least someone who looked exactly like me, standing in front of a house I didn't recognize. Dated May 12, 2003. I would have been 10 years old. Except, I had no memory of that place. None at all. That's when I realized something that made my blood run cold. This wasn't just a mystery. This was personal, and whatever was waiting for me on page 7 was already part of my life, whether I remembered it or not. And that was only the beginning, because what I found next changed everything. I sat there in my car for a long time, the photograph still clutched in my hand, my mind refusing to accept what my eyes were clearly seeing. It wasn't just a resemblance, it was me, same eyes, same posture. Even the way the kid in the photo stood slightly tilted, like he wasn't fully comfortable being in front of a camera. That was something people had pointed out about me my whole life. But I had never seen that house before. I was sure of it. I turned the photograph over, hoping for some kind of explanation. But there was only a date scribbled in faded ink. May 12, 2003, no address. No names, nothing else. Just proof that at some point in my life, I had been somewhere I couldn't remember, and someone had made sure that I would see it again. Eventually, I drove home in silence, my thoughts spiraling into places I couldn't control. I kept trying to rationalize it. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe someone who looked like me had been photographed by chance. But deep down, I knew none of that made sense. Because of the will, because of the message, because of page 7. When I got back to my apartment, I locked the door behind me and immediately checked every room, every corner, every window. Everything was exactly as I had left it. But it didn't feel that way. It felt like something had changed, like the air itself had shifted. I placed the photograph on the table and just stared at it for a while, trying to decide what to do next. Start with the photograph. That's what it said. So, I did the only thing I could think of. I looked closer. The house in the background wasn't large, but it wasn't small either. 2 stories, pale siding, a narrow porch. There was a tree off to the side, tall and slightly leaning, its branches stretching across the frame like they were trying to hide something. And then I noticed something I hadn't seen before, a number, barely visible, but there, on the front of the house, partially obscured by shadow. I leaned in, squinting, adjusting the angle of the photo against the light. 17. That was all I could make out. Just a number, but it was something. And right now, something was enough. I grabbed my laptop and started searching. It wasn't easy. There are a lot of houses with the number 17. Entire streets, entire neighborhoods. At first, it felt like I was chasing nothing. But then I remembered something else. The storage unit. Schedule B. Item 2. If the photograph was meant to lead me somewhere, then maybe the rest of the items would help me understand why. I hesitated for a moment before grabbing my keys again. Part of me didn't want to keep going, but a bigger part of me needed to know. The storage facility was on the outskirts of the city, quiet, almost too quiet. The kind of place people don't think about unless they have a reason to be there. And now, apparently, I did. The office was empty when I walked in, except for a man sitting behind the counter who looked like he hadn't moved in years. "I'm here for a unit," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He looked up slowly. Name? Daniel Carter. He didn't ask any more questions. Just typed something into his computer, nodded once, and handed me a key. Unit 43. Back row. That was it. No paperwork. No verification. No hesitation. Like he had been expecting me. I walked out into the rows of storage units, the gravel crunching under my feet, louder than it should have. Each step felt heavier than the last. Unit for 3. It was exactly where he said it would be. I stood there for a moment, staring at the lock, the key in my hand, suddenly feeling like it weighed 1,000 pounds. This was it. Whatever Edward Hale had left for me. It started here. I unlocked the door and slowly pulled it open. The inside was dark. Not empty. But quiet. Still. Like it had been waiting. There were only a few items. Inside, a chair, a small table. A box. And sitting on top of that box, a journal. I stepped inside, my heart beating harder with every movement, and reached for it. The cover was worn, the edges frayed. It looked old, but not neglected. Like it had been handled often. I opened it, and the first thing I saw was my name, written in handwriting that wasn't mine, but felt familiar. Daniel, if you're reading this, then you found it. I froze. Every instinct in my body told me to close the journal and walk away. But I didn't. I couldn't. Before you go any further, you need to understand something. None of this is random. None of this is an accident. You were always meant to find this. My throat felt dry. I turned the page. I don't expect you to remember. In fact, it's better if you don't. At least, it was. But things have changed. And if you're reading this now, it means the timeline has already started to shift. Shift.timeline. This wasn't just strange anymore. This was something else entirely. I flipped through more pages, scanning, trying to make sense of anything I could. There were dates, notes, observations, and then a line that made my stomach drop. You went to the house on May 12, 2003. You weren't supposed to. That's when everything began. I stepped back slightly, the journal trembling in my hands. That date, the photograph. The house. This wasn't a coincidence. This was connected, all of it. I kept reading. I tried to stop it. I tried to change things. But every time I got close, something pushed back. Like it didn't want to be changed. Like it needed things to happen exactly the way they did. I swallowed hard. What is this? I whispered to myself, but there was no answer. Only more words. More pieces of something I still couldn't fully see. The record is the key. That's why it's last. That's why it matters. If you understand the record, you understand everything. The record. Item 5. Schedule B. Page 7. I flipped to the last written page of the journal. And there, in bold, uneven handwriting, was a final message. You will go to the house again. You have to. That's the only way this ends. But when you do, don't trust what you see. Because it's not just a place. My heart pounded in my chest. What does that even mean? I closed the journal slowly, my mind racing. The house, the photograph, the date, the message. Everything was pointing to one place. And for the first time since this started, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel before. Fear. Real. Fear, because whatever happened on May 12, 2003, had never really ended, and now, it was waiting for me to come back.
That's all for today's story. If this resonated with you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. This is Storyova, where your story matters. And I'll see you in the next one.